Hi, I'm going to tell you my top 10 surreal and absurd short story collections. Number 10 is Hall of Small Mammals by Thomas Pierce. This is the best kind of magical realism where it's just ordinary people with extraordinary things happening in their lives, and it's not really about the logistics of the things that are happening to them like sci-fi often is. It's more about their reactions and responses to these weird things going on. Like having really intensely realistic dreams about your domestic life with a husband that doesn't exist, or raising a woolly mammoth that your son has cloned in his lab at work and then brought home to you illegally because it was going to be killed. One of the most memorable stories in this collection for me is about a woman and her brother who are stuck inside of a kitchen cabinet while the dogs in the house are being very aggressive trying to attack them, and it slowly builds on the relationship between the two characters, and you discover why they're in this situation in the first place. If you really like clear-cut endings and a strong sense of closure, this book probably isn't for you because it doesn't often have that. But if you're into fascinating characters who are interacting with a really engaging premise, then this is the book for you. Number 9 is Fabulous by Lucy Hughes-Hallett. This is a collection of retellings of myths and fairy tales and fables set in modern-day England. It has a really sharp eye for identifying the universal aspects of the human experience and the parallels between modern-day England and the original setting that these stories were written in. And the first story just hooked me in. It's this devastating retelling of Orpheus and Eurydice where Orpheus has dementia. You don't have to be familiar with the source content of these stories because there's story notes at the end of the book that tell you everything you need to know to fully appreciate the retellings. Though the stories definitely range in quality, I found this really refreshing overall. I thought it was refreshing takes on old stories, and it was also a refreshing social commentary. Number 8 is The Pump by Sydney Warner Brooman. I talked about this a little bit in the books that I read in June video. This is a collection of interconnected stories that all take place in the same small rural Ontario town. At the same time, it's body horror and environmental horror with government corruption, people eating beavers, and a poisoned water supply. I did think that the connections between each story could be a little contrived, but more than anything, I found it really fun and exciting to connect who was related to who and where you had heard this name back in the book and what you already knew about characters that are being reintroduced later on. In one story, a cat brings offerings to an old woman who hides them from her wife. In another story, there's a horrific and completely avoidable accident while on a Boy Scout hike. A girl develops a rash that mutilates her mind and body, and then through all of this, there's also stories of cute, gay, awkward camp counselor teenagers. It really deals with religious bigotry and what it means to be queer in a small town that doesn't accept you in a really dark and gross and funny way. The cat is biting me right now. Do you not want to be touched? I don't have to touch you. Number 7 is Upright Beasts by Ling and Michel. This is a very fun and inventive and weird collection of stories that are really about the behaviors and impulses of human beings, particularly when those people are thrown into really surreal scenarios, like a zombie outbreak while you're on a couple's retreat in a cabin in the woods, or a boy who grows up in the bellies of a series of larger and larger animals who meets a girl who pulls him to the outside, or a guy managing an apartment complex full of people trying to end their lives, or a woman who slowly recognizes aspects of the body that she finds outside of her home. This has the most ridiculous and fun thing I've ever seen anyone do in a book, which is the note on the type, which starts as a regular note on the type and then evolves into another weird short story that fictionalizes the life of the person who created the font used for the book. It's amazing, and it's this little Easter egg that's not in the table of contents or anything like that. You just flip from the last page and there's another story. It was very much possible that no one would ever see this, but the writing is so good that you want more. So even after you know the last story is finished, you flip and then you find it. It's just perfect. What it is clever. The entire book is very clever and very bizarre and fun. Number 6 is Out There by Kate Folk, and this is where we start to fold in some of my favorite themes that go along with magical realism, which are mainly about how humans interact with technology. And I don't love when this goes over into the sci-fi realm because I really care about the social dynamics, and this book hits the nail on the head for that. There's fake AI boyfriends who romance women to steal their information. There's a woman in a treatment home for a weird bone melting disorder, and another woman comes into the home and there's this crazy love triangle jealousy that has this shocking ending that left me gobsmacked. It's super absurd and eerie, and all the stories are so compelling it's really hard to put this book down. Number 5 is You Will Never Be Forgotten by Mary South, and this is in a really similar vein to Out There in that it's about humans interacting with technology and using technology to avoid being human. One story is about a reporter interviewing an architect who uses her daughter's disability as inspiration but denies it, and the whole story leaves you wondering who to believe and who's trustworthy. There's a summer camp for recovering internet trolls. There's a hostel where everyone drinks the breast milk of one of the women staying there, and it's really about dependency, and how women are expected to cater to men and give everything up for nothing in return. This is delightful and strange and funny. The author's voice is so humorous even when she's dealing with really dark subjects. Number 4 is Bliss Montage by Ling. This is about friendship and love and connection, and it's those really offbeat premises that sound super weird when you say them out loud but just make sense while you're reading it. Like living in a house with all of your ex-boyfriends, or having one last hurrah with an old friend who you don't want to see again, and taking drugs together that make you turn invisible, or traveling to a distant land to participate in a healing ceremony that will fix all of your problems if you just bury yourself alive. The storytelling is fabulous, and I love this so much that I took out her other book, Severance, from the library, and then I lost it. It's the only library book that I've ever lost. I left it on the ferry, and no one ever brought it back to Lost and Found. It just disappeared. So like, I had to pay $40 to the library for it. I lost my bookmark that was in it that had these cute little pig-shaped clips that I used to mark quotes down, and I still want to read Severance, but I cannot bring myself to take it out from the library again. They have more copies, but like, what if I lost another copy of it? I could never go back to the library, and the library is my whole life. So I just never get to read that book. I might have to buy it, and then I will have spent like $60 on one book because I've already spent $40 paying back the library for it. Number 3 is Someone Who Will Love You in All Your Damaged Glory by Raphael bob-waksburg. This is the book that really got me into this genre. When I picked it up, I was reading mostly just nonfiction, and it convinced me to be a short story reader. This is written by the creator of BoJack Horseman, and I took this out from the library mainly because I was in love with my best friend who many years ago introduced me to BoJack Horseman. We've both kind of grown out of it now, but at the time, being like freshly 18 years old, it was something that we both really liked, and I kind of thought that taking this out would be impressive or something like that. And I don't think it was the catalyst, but we are in a happy, healthy relationship now. I just could not put this down. My favorite story, and the one I've probably reread the most times out of any of the stories in these collections, it was originally posted as a missed connection on Craigslist. And it begins as a normal missed connection, but it slowly evolves as the two people on this subway train grow old, trying to work up the nerve to talk to each other. And you can go read it on Craigslist right now. I will link it below. It's beautiful. Another story involves an engaged couple whose families are arguing about how many goats they need to sacrifice at their wedding. And in another one, there's a group of teenage superheroes who save the world over and over again, but it's not really about them saving the world. It's about their like young adult dynamics and them bickering and falling apart. And it has the best quote ever that I'm gonna read, and it's a long quote, and so if you don't care, just skip like a minute ahead. I remember one time I asked Iris if she was afraid to die. Iris said, afraid or not, it didn't really matter. That the thing about death is that it's terrifying and overwhelming, and it can happen at any moment. And when we're confronted with death, we can either be cowardly or we can be brave. But either way, we're gonna die, so... And I thought, whoa, that's dark. But here I was, sitting in my childhood bedroom with a guitar. The up-and-comers were over and done with, and it was just Lizzie and me, and it was the afternoon, and it was summer in Tulsa, and Lizzie was lying on my bed, looking as calm and beautiful as I had ever seen her, and she was asking me to play her something I had written. And I thought about how, actually, if you wanted to, you could say the same thing about life. That life is terrifying and overwhelming, and it can happen at any moment. And when you're confronted with life, you can either be cowardly or you can be brave. But either way, you're gonna live, so you might as well be brave. The writing is just spectacular. I tabbed almost every page of this book. It's really about being depressed, being in love, being in relationship with other people, and being a human on planet Earth. And it's tragic, and it's funny, and it's so real and relatable. I cried so hard it made me hiccup when I was reading this, like I was a blubbering fucking mess. Because it's just so warm, and it just spoke to me. I think it speaks to the human condition in such a perfectly done way. Number 2 is Exhalation by Ted Chiang. This book is beyond words. I don't know how to describe it because it left me absolutely dumbstruck. I think that Chiang is maybe the most masterful writer I've ever read anything from. I saw this recommended by Jacob Geller, and I was like, I don't really like sci-fi, but I do like short stories, and I also really trust this man's taste. And I was right to, and he was right to recommend it, because this is one of the most perfect short story collections that has ever been written. The first story is a time travel story that doesn't use the idea that you can't change the past as a source of pain, but rather you can't change the past, but you can go back and know it better. And it's devastating but beautiful and also hopeful. The most visceral story that I think about the most often is this story of this woman. It's a series of letters from her to God, and she's a scientist living on an alternate version of Earth where creationism is provable by science. Like, God exists, and you know it in the tree rings and the fossils that have been left behind by him. And it really asks, what if God was real, but he was indifferent. What a fucking premise. Like, how did he come up with this? And that's kind of the amazing thing, is that at the end of the book, there's story notes that tells you how he comes up with each of these things and what he's trying to say in each story, that are like so exciting to read. Every time I finished one of these stories, I was so excited flipping to the back of the book to see what more he had to say about them. There's major themes of like free will and just humanity in general that are handled so thoughtfully and with such grace. Each and every story in this collection left me with so much to think about, and I was compelled to read all of them like obsessively, even if they took place in settings that I wouldn't normally be interested in. And I think that I'm still stuck asking myself the questions that this book asked me. Even if you don't read sci-fi, this is worth the read. Number 1 is Lesser Known Monsters of the 21st Century by Kim Fu. This book fucks. I loved every story in here. My partner just randomly picked this up at the library and said, "This looks really weird. I think you would like it. It's about death, it's about loss, it's about guilt, and being in relationship with friends, lovers, and family." One of the stories centers around a group of young girls, and one of the girls grows wings on her legs, and it's kind of body horror in the way that Being 13 is inherently body horror, but it's also like this coming-of-age, magical, sweet story. A woman moves into a bug-infested house while escaping an abusive relationship, and it turns into this really intense nightmare. Another woman fantasizes about all the alternate lives that she could have led, and in my favorite story, a couple discovers that they can kill each other and be resurrected 24 hours later, and the man keeps killing his wife over and over, not to kill her, but because he wants her to come back. Not a single story in this collection is bad or even mediocre. They're all so invariably good, and each story leaves you with a sense of closure that makes you kind of want to put the book down and just digest it, but the writing is so fantastic that it's hard not to just keep going and eat it all up. This is wickedly imaginative and deeply engaging with some of the best storytelling and superb writing that I've ever read. I want more and more and more people to read this book because it was just that good. Those are my 10 recommendations. I love this genre and I love this format, and I'm so excited that there are so many books with this genre and format. I feel like magical realism lends itself so well to the format of short stories because you don't really have to flesh out the world in this like kind of tedious way. You can just get right into it, and I love that about all of these books. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.